So, good morning. And today is Mothering Sunday. And thank you, Randolph, 2 great readings for Mothering Sunday. So, hands up. How many of you have bought or sent flowers? Chocolates? Excellent. And how many of you are planning to visit mothers or grandmothers this afternoon? Brilliant. There's really enthusiastic Mothering Sunday people here. It's been at the back of my mind for a long time that our Mothering Sunday and American Mother's Day are not quite the same thing, but I wasn't really sure what the differences were. I've also wondered why we celebrate Mothering Sunday on the fourth Sunday in Lent. What is the Lenten connection to mothers and mothering? So this year, I decided to do some digging. The fourth Sunday in Lent has also been known as Laetare Sunday. And in medieval times, it was a day when the fasting of Lent could be relaxed halfway through the season. Many of the Bible texts for that day had association with mothers or used the metaphor of mother for the church. For example, the Latin word laetare, which gives its name to the day, means rejoice. And it comes from a text in Isaiah, chapter 66, verses 10 and 11, which was set for the day. And this passage starts with the words, rejoice with Jerusalem and be glad for her. And it goes on to compare Jerusalem and the church, giving life to its spiritual children in the way that a woman gives birth to her actual children. The mother in this passage is Mother Church. Over time, people began to make visits to their mother church on Laetare Sunday, either to the church where they were baptized or a local cathedral. And by the 16th century, this seems to have been a well-established custom, and the phrase "gone a mothering" is recorded to describe the tradition. In later times, Mothering Sunday became a day when domestic servants were given the day off to visit their mother church with their own mothers and families. And it might be the only time when families gather together. The tradition of picking and giving flowers to place in the church developed. And over the following centuries, Mothering Sunday became established as a day for families to reunite, celebrate, and honor their mothers as the focus of the family. However, by the early 20th century, the custom of keeping Mothering Day had waned. And in the UK, Mothering Sunday might have passed completely out of modern life if it wasn't for the work of Constance Penswick Smith, who was a redoubtable woman by all accounts. She inspired a movement to restore Mothering Sunday. And in her book, published in 1921, she outlined 4 aspects of mothering that the day should honor beyond the strictly biological. She talks about the church, our mother, mothers of earthly homes, the mother of Jesus, and perhaps very relevantly now, the gifts of Mother Earth. Separately, in the US, women's activists, Julia Ward Howe and Anne Jarvis, had established Mothers' Friendship Days to reunite families divided by the American Civil War. And in May 1914, Congress designated the second Sunday in May as Mother's Day in honor of mothers whose sons had died in war, thus initiating a secular celebration of mothers. After World War II, the mixing of American and British cultures has led to our current blend of American-style Mother's Day celebrations with the ancient traditional Mothering Sunday of our English church. So, sorry for that kind of historical digression, but Mothering Sunday has always had many strands of association: biological motherhood, the church as mother by nourishing and protecting, caring for creation and the fruits of Mother Earth, and mothers as sustainers. On this Mothering Sunday, I want to explore what we want to celebrate about mothering, and are there further strands of what mothering means that we can take from our readings this morning. So let's look at the first reading from Exodus. This is the well-known story of the birth of Moses, and I think it's helpful to put this story in context, and I'd like to briefly look at the passage in chapter 1 that immediately precedes the story that Randolph just read. It starts at chapter 1, verse 18, and again, you can find it on page 50 in the Old Testament. The Hebrews are living in Egypt where they had gone to escape famine in their own land. For many years, they had lived in peace with the Egyptians, but now a new Pharaoh sees them as a threat, and no longer a favored people, the Hebrews have become enslaved. Afraid of the Hebrews' increase in number and power, Pharaoh orders their midwives to murder male Hebrew babies as they are delivered. We're even given the names of these two midwives, Shiphrah and Puah. Shiphrah and Puah refuse to carry out the Pharaoh's orders, and they save the Hebrew boys. In the face of this resistance, Pharaoh then commands the Egyptians to kill any male Hebrew children they can find. And here we pick up our reading from this morning. The resistance doesn't end with the midwives. We meet Moses' mother, who in the face of the murderous edict from Pharaoh has figured out a way to save her son, and she sets him adrift on the Nile. The English word we have translated as basket to describe the container into which she put Moses in Hebrew is the same word as the one used for ark in the Noah story. So it is clearly a place of refuge and safety. And the resistance continues. Moses' sister, usually identified as Miriam, escorts the little ark and waits. There she is, standing slightly back and waiting for the right person to come along. Is it too much to think that Moses' mother and sister must know that Pharaoh's palace lies just downriver and that this is a strategic and daring plan? And the plan works. The little ark flows right into the hands of Pharaoh's daughter. Pharaoh's daughter rescues him, even though she immediately recognizes him as a Hebrew child. So she too is part of the resistance. Miriam, who just happens to be nearby, knows exactly where to find a woman who can nurse the baby. Moses' own mother, of course. And to top it off, Pharaoh's daughter actually pays Moses' mother to nurse the baby. This chain of resistance is executed exclusively by women, both Hebrew and Egyptian. And Pharaoh's plans are subverted and Moses survives. So let's turn to our reading from John. And it's a change of feeling. It's Good Friday. We're at the foot of the cross. Jesus is hanging there in front of us. And here again, we find women. Depending on how you read it, 3 or 4 of them, along with the beloved disciple. When referring to the earliest followers of Jesus, the gospel writers often speak of 2 groups, the 12 and the women. The 12 are the dozen Jewish men chosen by Jesus to be his companions and the first apostles. The women are an unspecified number of female disciples who also follow Jesus. They welcome him into their homes. They financed his ministry. They studied his teaching, and often, it seems, demonstrated a greater understanding of what Jesus was about than the 12. As Jesus predicted, most of the 12 would abandon him at his death, but the women remained by his side. Throughout his death, burial, and resurrection, we find the women. Mary, the sister of Lazarus, anoints Jesus at Bethany before his entry into Jerusalem. And it is Mary Magdalene who finds the empty tomb and first sees the resurrected Jesus. The women are present at the critical, consequential moments in the Easter story, as we shall read in a few weeks. It is not unremarkable that God chose a woman to anoint the Messiah with oil. It is not an accident that the first person to declare that Jesus was risen from the dead was a woman. And it is important that a mother heard his cries from the cross. Jesus' mother appears only twice in the Gospel of John, at the wedding in Cana, and here now at the foot of the cross. She bookcases Jesus' earthly ministry. She is there at the beginning, and she watches him die. She is the nurturing force who submits to God in the first place to become his mother, and she continues as a sustaining presence to the end. Jesus came to us in human form, born of a mother who nurtured him and cared for him. He understood what it is to be human, to love and be loved. And as he died, Jesus reached out to those from whom he had learned about human love, his mother, his closest disciples. He sees his mother at the foot of the cross, heartbroken, inconsolable, and his heart goes out to her. Rather than being consumed by an understandable concern for his own welfare, he is touched by hers. We see a human mother and son, loving and loved. And in that reciprocity, we find the bigger love, the love of God. So what do these two stories tell us? The story of the birth of Moses is a story of compassion and care. Through a complex chain of events, both the birth mother and the royal daughter care for the baby Moses, protecting his life and providing a nurturing environment in which he can grow. The careful placement of the baby in an ark describes and demonstrates this nurturing. This is all in contrast to the preceding part of the story, which revolves around the idea of fear. The new Pharaoh feared the potential uprising of the Hebrew people, and that fear became the driving force to a series of escalating oppressive policies, even to the point of planned genocide. Pharaoh's type of leadership and lordship are all about being threatened and seeking control through killing and multiplying suffering. We are invited to see God's lordship as different to Pharaoh's. God exercises his power through compassion rather than coercion, and through ordinary people like Shiphrah and Pur. The midwives do not fear the Egyptian king. Their faith in God enables them to defy the order of Pharaoh and openly disobey his command. Moses' mother acts out of maternal compassion, but do not mistake this compassion for weakness. Maternal care is powerful. As Pharaoh increases the oppression, the compassion of the different women ends up raising the one Moses, who we know will go on to lead the Hebrews into liberation from their oppression. The story of Mary at the foot of the cross is a demonstration of the determination to go on standing by those you love through everything. Mary went on loving. Jesus went on loving. He loved those who nailed him to the cross. He loved those who hung there with him. He loved those who mocked him. He knew the only way to overcome the brokenness of the world was to infuse it with love. In the relationship between Jesus and his mother, we find a pattern for our relationship with God centered on this radical love. And the stories of the women of Holy Week, in them we find a pattern for God's kingdom. When the rest of the world had given up on Jesus for failing to look like the liberator they expected, the women stuck around. They understood that the kingdom is not about the power of coercion like that which sustained the Roman tyranny of the day. The kingdom was about peace as an alternative to violence and amassing wealth. The women stuck around because before Jesus was a king, Jesus was a mother. And mothers love their children through uncertainty, pain, fear, disappointment, and even death. And so back to mothering. As we baptize some wonderful children, I'd like to leave you with two thoughts about mothering. Firstly, mothering is about liberation. If we are mothering children, and I think that mothering is not done by biological women, I think men can mother too, then we are bringing up children to be free agents, free of us, free to make their own choices. God gives us free will, and mothering is about bringing up children to be able to use the hearts and minds that God gave us in his image. More broadly, a mothering approach, for example, in the workplace, is an approach that values freedom of thought and acceptance of difference, that liberates the talents and gifts that we are all given to be used to the glory of God. Secondly, and finally, mothering is about compassion, not coercion. Coercive power is power over, but the enabling power of compassion is the power to fulfill. God's power is never coercive. He invites us through Jesus to join with him in fulfilling his kingdom here and now. That invitation is ours to accept at any time. Perhaps we can think of it as an invitation for us to be the midwives of God's kingdom and the mothers of his children. Amen.
Amen.